Hello, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. My name is Carlos Vargas, and I lead the section for teacher development at UNESCO.
Nice to meet you. What do you think about the post-pandemic needs of education?
Well, I think that we have learned some lessons in the pandemic uh, about education, about the way that we have structured education and how we need to change it. We know education systems before the pandemic already had particular problems when it comes to inequality, when it came to discrimination, for example, of diversity, different problems in terms of the curriculum that was sometimes not the most updated, the pedagogy is very traditional. But the pandemic showed us, and from one day to the other, that education can change. And I think that is one of the biggest lessons that the pandemic did, that education can be transformed from one day to the next. In terms of the content, we saw during the pandemic some of the content that became most important and vital was actually about healthcare, for example, and not necessarily the curriculum of whatever is in the textbook. So that kind of adaptation is also something that is important. So there were changes in terms of content, in terms of the pedagogies that were used. We saw teachers go to different formats, from the distance education to TV, radio, the use of ICTs, with the problems of connectivity that there are in the world, and hybrid forms of education. So we saw again that after the pandemic, education methods need to diversify. We need to use all of the methods, all of the supports that we have in our environments, which might be technological or less technological. The book itself is a technology, or was a technology back then in the 15th century. So we can use not only books, but digital media, radio, TV, our own communities, our own households are learning spaces. So I think one learning from the pandemic is how the household, the community, the church, the market, the community center, the library are all educational places. We can learn outside of a school and actually can reinforce the learning that happens within the school grounds. So that is important. I would say a second lesson has to do with the importance that we place on the socialization, on the collective action. As we said, the realization of the pandemic was that the biggest problems of humanity can only be solved if we act collectively, if we act together. That's the case for climate change, that's the claim for violent conflict, that's the case for discrimination. We can only avoid this illness of humanity if we work together and if we are educated together.